The DFS Studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borgoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in. It's Friday, November 15th, here on the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borgoni, and I'm joined, as always, by Matthew. He's not sure if the Eagles won bets.
Well, you'll know when you listen to this what kind of mood I'm waking up on a Friday in.
Our audience knows.
Recording this. Oh, they know. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon, so I am optimistic. I am hopeful. And you all will know how I feel tomorrow when you're listening to this. But yeah, man, that game, what a Thursday night game, am I right? My goodness.
And then when that play happened in the second half, the whole momentum of the game just shifted.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
So it was good times. It is funny living in the past with podcasting. You know, we're a futuristic organization, but you know, when we record, there's the process of when Betz and I can get on our schedule. There's the process of when our production team can get out there, schedule it, put all those things out. And by that time, I mean, we are so far behind what's happening in the nation, what's happening in the world. We're just two dudes living in the past talking about football.
I mean, you joke, but it's actually very true, right? Because there's so much that changes in the NFL day to day. Like, you know, every now and then T. Higgins decides on a Friday to get hurt and ruins the show, ruins the podcast. You know, we're not going to talk about him today, but he is in that Sunday night game, which is on FanDuel. So yeah, man, it is funny how that works out, but that's why we always say, make sure you're in Discord with the DFS Pass because we'll keep you updated there. And then as well, best plays on Saturday, we'll have you covered.
I am kind of excited about that Sunday night game. Chargers, you know, I've always had a soft spot for the Chargers Bengals, and that is included in the FanDuel main slate. And so I've kind of got to look at that game a little differently than I normally do because yours truly is now writing the FanDuel cash picks, which you can see in the DFS Pass. So if you want all of our picks, DraftKings from Betz, FanDuel cash picks from me, the optimizer, everything else in there, you go to dfspass.com, use the promo code DFSPod. I did notice, and if you're a longtime listener but first-time DFS passer, we have some new people in there that I think they heard that the props were hot, and so they're on board. That's like the main thing that's drawing them in.
What could go wrong, Kyle? I'm sorry, everyone. You're going to be terribly disappointed. If I'm being honest.
Don't. You know, it is tough because I think you and I try to be modest people and try to give perspective and nuance to what we do because with football, there's just so much more variance than people realize. Just way over the top when it comes to props, week to week stuff. Like I look at even my home league matchups and I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I do this for my job. I look at the projections and go, I could lose. I totally could lose. Like it's not always going to work that way. But our props alerts, you can get access to that. And really just the channel as a whole. I'm even seeing, you know, some basketball props that people are throwing in our channel if you're one of those members. So ballersdiscord.com if you want to be a member there.
Yeah, but real quick before we move on from that, we've had some folks reaching out because, as Kyle said, we've got, you know, this hot deal with the holidays coming up. DFS Pass is cheaper than ever. You get the promo code, and now we've had some success recently, right? So people are naturally wanting to check it out. If you're new and you just hopped in Discord, make sure you go into the props channel, and if you want to get alerted when we take a prop, you have to react to the pinned message at the top of the props channel. When you do that, you'll be able to get an alert from us every time we take a prop. That way you get the best line and you get the odds that we take, not, you know, 4 hours late and things move. So that's how you get in there. Make sure you hop in Discord. It comes with your DFS Pass.
And what Betz is really saying is when he drops a couple of G's on, you know, and under, what he ends up doing is
correct.
Moving the lines.
Just shifting them a yard, half a yard even sometimes.
Oh my gosh. The EV, Kyle, when it goes from 63.5 to 62.5, are you kidding me? Take it to the bank, baby.
I mean, there's few things in life that you can really boast to your spouse by saying like, hey, I might have helped be a part of a group of people online that move someone's passing yardage total a yard.
How was work today, honey? Not bad, We moved Pickens' line up about 2 yards, so I'm getting really good closing line value there. We'll take that to the bank, and we'll pay for Christmas for the kids with this closing line value.
And then she asked, "Did it hit? Did the prop hit?"
And that's when you just change the subject.
Yeah,
abort.
You start talking about holidays, and do you guys already decorate for Christmas stuff?
We don't. I don't know if this is just like old school me, but I still like Thanksgiving. I like to enjoy that holiday for what it is. Not that I'm not excited for Christmas. I love Christmas. But the day after Thanksgiving, we always get our tree. So it's a tradition. We get our tree the day after Thanksgiving. And then from then on out, it's Christmas 24/7. But I wait until Thanksgiving.
We kind of do this little half and half where I was the dad, I was the husband that got all the stuff out of like the attic, area, all the boxes. And then we kind of like half, like we put some garlands around and those kind of things. We have a little mini tree in our front like library room, but we don't put up the big tree. We don't put up any outdoor stuff yet till after Thanksgiving, but it's kind of like a slow burn. And then
makes sense.
And then also we've been starting fire season where like we have our little fireplace, and I'm not gonna lie, it's like my new favorite thing. Late at night.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah. Just get a little book and see what happens, and then I fall asleep at 9:00.
Such a dad.
I know. All right, moving on.
Straight cash, homie.
All right. These are our cash picks, and you can find our official ones if you want our rationale behind it. If you want to kind of mix and match, you can do that in the DFS Pass. At quarterback this week, I did not know that I would have Anthony Richardson back in my life. Very thankful in a Superflex league that I at least have somebody to start. But the conversation kind of becomes, do you play Brock Purdy at home? We'll profile that game. But at 6.6, that is not as expensive as he should be by the way that he's throwing and running, by the way. Like Brock Purdy quietly is top 10 in the league. I think he has the same amount of rush attempts as Kyler. Like he's right there.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I would have never guessed that.
Kyler has
I knew he'd been running more. I didn't know it had been that much, but
I need to fact check myself. But he's 6.6 against Seattle. You can go there if you want. On FanDuel, you need to add Justin Herbert in the mix if you want Justin Herbert at 7.3. But I think the conversation, if you wanted to pay down this week, you play Jameis in a revenge game, who's had 40-plus pass attempts in both starts, or you can play Anthony Richardson. So can we first start there and then kind of like see how you're feeling? But Jameis and Anthony Richardson, are you considering that in cash?
I think they're in play if you did want to go down that far. And I think before you even like dive into each specific player, it's kind of important to lay out the context of the slate, at least of what we're thinking as of now. It feels very similar to last week, where it's like you've got studs at running back that you want to try to figure out how to fit them in. And at wide receiver, like I'm really not trying to spend up very much. It looks like another week to go into the 5K range, the 6K range. At wide receiver, find a punt option, punt at tight end, and spend your money at running back this week. And so in order to do that, you do have to come down at quarterback. That's how I'm leaning on this slate anyway. And so those three names you mentioned, Purdy, Winston, and Anthony Richardson, I'll let you go on Richardson. I think it's going to take some convincing for me. I'm leaning Purdy of that group. Just, again, not overthinking it. The Niners at home, they've got the second highest team implied total on the slate. You've got Juwan Jennings playing very well. We'll talk about him. You've got Christian McCaffrey back in the lineup. You've got Debo still doing his thing. I really hope Kittle plays. He's dealing with a little bit of a hamstring issue. Even if Kittle is out, though, I still think Purdy's in. I feel so confident about this team, right? And when I think about where we're at in the season, like it's starting to get to that time of year where like you got to question some teams' motivation levels. Like the Niners have to go all out to make the postseason. So I expect the best from Kyle Shanahan, from Brock Purdy and company, in a potential shootout with Seattle. So I lean Brock Purdy if I had to pick. As far as Winston goes, it's a volume play. I mean, it could go south quick, my friend. But the Browns are 5th in PROE over the last month with Winston under center. And the Saints secondary is just decimated by injury. Of course, they just traded away Marshawn Lattimore. So the matchup is there. And I actually kind of like that game too from a potential back and forth in the Dome there in New Orleans. So those are my top two picks. I will let you tell the people about the Steel Underpants play of the week in Anthony Richardson.
I get it. Because it is, you need a little bit of gumption to play Anthony Richardson after what you've seen By the way, update, Purdy, Kyler Murray, same exact rush attempts. And speaking of rushing, Richardson, he's averaged 6.8 attempts, 40 rushing yards of ground. So we know we like the floor there. But can I interest you in a Jets defense that we would say, oh, this is a tough defense, you don't want to play against them? Last week, Kyler Murray went off against them, and you really have to kind of ask yourself the question, what does Richardson have to do at his price point? At 5.3, 6.4 on FanDuel. Would you say, would you be happy with 15 points?
Probably.
Okay.
I think at that price point, you're probably okay with that.
Yeah, you're basically asking him to 3x on his salary. So what if I told you that Kyler Murray not only doubled that last week, but over the last 5 weeks, the Jets have allowed 5 straight quarterbacks to go over 15 fantasy points, and they rank 29th in schedule adjusted fantasy points to quarterbacks over the last 5 weeks.
Robert Saleh is just kind of sitting here smiling.
Yes.
Just saying, maybe it wasn't me. And we all know it wasn't. Robert Saleh is a great defensive mind, and this defense has been horrendous since he left. They're a bottom 10 team in EPA per play since he left, specifically 27th in EPA per play in the situation without Robert Saleh. So yeah, the defense is not imposing. Now, they still have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball, so I wouldn't be shocked if we see Richardson go on the road to MetLife and lay an egg, because, well, that's what he's done every time he's taken the field. My lean is to not play him in cash. I just think there's so many ways where it goes south. That said, he could still be terrible and run for, 50 yards or something and a touchdown and probably be fine for cash, right? So I get it on Richardson. It's just a tough sell based off what you've seen. I will say too, I would love for Pittman to be in there for me to have any confidence in Richardson, at least like another thing in his camp. He was full practice to start the week, so I think he'll be back, but we know he's been in and out of the lineup with the back issue. So the more I talk about it, I think I'm leaning away from Richardson, but I wouldn't fault anyone.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm still going back and forth. I think Purdy's just the easier click, just to say like, hey, I know I'm going to get what I'm going to get, and we'll talk about that game in a second. So that's kind of the different tiers of players. If you want to mix and match, like, do you need the $1,300? Do you need the $1,100 up from Winston? You can look in that direction. Running back, I'm just going to say it. I'm playing Christian McCaffrey at 8,300. I even wrote him up in FanDuel. And by the way, did you see his price on FanDuel?
I think it's like, what is it, 9,800 or something ridiculous?
9,800. I was like, oh man, this is like a lot to pay, but it's also to the point of, we got 20 plus touches last week. And so I think on DraftKings, he's like a priority play. Like, he's like one of the best plays on the slate at home as almost a touchdown favorite. So McCaffrey is somebody I'm pretty much trying to force into my lineup if possible. And you can play him with Purdy. Last week, I think it was 6 receptions. So CMC's at the top. Kamara's another awesome option at 8.2. He's just going to see a ton of work. Last week, remember when we were joking, we're like, who else are they going to throw the ball to? MVS? They did. And they did throw to MVS. So where else are you looking at running back?
Yeah, those two at the top look incredibly strong to me. And I agree with you for McCaffrey. He's a priority play in cash. When I talked on the Injury Blitz pod and we talked on this show, my outlook on him was like, rationally, I think it makes sense for this team to kind of like give him time to like ramp up his workload, because the dude hasn't played football since January of this past year. Like, it's been forever. But Kyle Shanahan is a sicko. And as I mentioned with Brock Purdy, this team has no choice. They have to win these games because they're on the outside right now looking in on the playoff picture. And we saw that last week, 54 out of 61 snaps, 20 total opportunities. And for context, Jordan Mason, Isaac Grendo each touched the ball one time. So this is the Christian McCaffrey show. And if there's any doubt on George Kittle's hamstring, even more volume and opportunity for Christian McCaffrey. So it's very hard to poke holes in him in this spot against Seattle. He's a priority play for me. I love Kamara. It didn't feel as good when you look at the box score last week, but he dropped a long touchdown pass. Like, he catches that 9 out of 10 times, certainly. You feel a lot different if that's the case. I will also note the rushing matchup is not as bad as you think it is against Cleveland. Since week 8, they are 25th in EPA per rush attempt allowed. The last two running backs they faced, Derrick Henry, J.K. Dobbins, both average over 6 yards per carry in this matchup. The problem for Cleveland, they're down Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, all-pro linebacker. Za'Darius Smith is now in Detroit. So Kamara, again, the receiving work, the rushing matchup is there in a potential back and forth. So those two at the top look strong. I feel like I keep talking about Breece Hall, and it kind of just feels like it hasn't happened, but the numbers say it should. I mean, he's expensive, relatively speaking, but he gets a matchup against the Colts. He's still playing over 80% of the snaps since the coaching change, averaging 19.4 total opportunities per game. And we know that he's involved no matter what the game script is, right? If they're winning, he's getting the ball. If they're losing, he's getting the ball in the receiving game. And Devontae Adams is banged up this week. So I think Hall looks strong if you need to drop down. But for me, I'm definitely playing one of McCaffrey or Kamara, I think, in cash.
Yeah, whenever somebody talks about Breece, and I'm a Breece manager in Home League, I feel like it's that Ron Burgundy gift where it's like, I don't believe you. Because I feel like I've been down this road with him, and yet at home, it projects really well against the Colts. So I can't fault anybody for playing Breece at 7.5. Devon Achane at 7.2 seems like a very strong play on DraftKings, knowing what his receiving work is. So that's another way. And then I wanted to check back in because we talked about Audric Estime early in the week, and it looks really cool when you put it in your lineup at 4.5. You're like, all right, I got a starting running back, and who's not going to catch any passes really. So are you interested in putting him in the player pool?
I think as of our recording, so when you listen to this on Friday, I think it's worth just monitoring any news Friday into the weekend on the backfield. You will see in our best plays update if we think he's playable in cash. As of our recording, I don't think he is, sadly, just because we have no definitive news on what this backfield is going to look like, how much Javonte plays or doesn't. Yeah, like you said, he's not really a pass catching back, and they've kind of talked about it ever since he was drafted. They've always talked about him as a first and second down, runner. And on DraftKings, even though he's only 4,500, if you are giving up a couple receptions here and there, there's such a high opportunity cost to use him in this spot when there's so many really strong plays at the top. So my lean is to not play him in cash. If we get some news of he's going to be the dude this weekend or something over the weekend, then sure, maybe he's in there. But as of our recording, I would not play him in cash.
Yeah, and just to let you know, one of the ways that we weigh out the best plays is also figuring out are people going to be playing this player? So it's one of those things where it's okay, usually if we had a free square, that's what we call in the slate of it's a cheap running back, everybody's going to play him. You and I would put him in there and say hey, you know what? You just eat it. 60, 70% of head-to-head lineups are going to have him. You just move on and you play the player. I just don't see Estime getting steamed up at all. I'm looking at early runs and in roster percentage and ownership, I just feel like he's not going to be played that much. So I don't really fear that. And because of that, I'm finding builds, I sent you a build this morning, where I can get 3 stud running backs into my cash lineup. It's possible if you play Richardson or Jameis to do it. So I think at the end of the day, my lean is that he will be out of our top 5, and you just don't need 4,500, from a running back to be able to play him.
Agreed.
Cool. And then for FanDuel, I did want to mention the running backs that are there on the Sunday night game. Chase Brown at 6.8 is a pretty good tag. J.K. Dobbins is 7.2. And then I think it's a fun play. I don't mind it, but Nick Chubb at 6.2 is in a really good matchup too against a run funnel Saints. I feel like his price is just abandoned at 6.2. So if you want to go there, FanDuel is the site where you traditionally play somebody like Nick Chubb, who's very touchdown heavy, but that's a good price compared to what we paid in the past. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll get to wide receivers. I feel so much more well-rounded in what I'm saying that I get to get a perspective of the slate, share some FanDuel thoughts. I mean, that's my bread and butter the last 5 years, and then I've kind of missed it. So, I don't know. Do you feel like I'm sharper, smarter? Do I sound smarter than I've ever been?
No. Sorry to say. You don't.
You sound very similar to the person I've talked to for years.
You sound the exact same as last week.
Okay. Another point that my wife will not care about is telling her this person's
100%.
a value on FanDuel. So at wide receiver, I don't really see the field paying up this week. Justin Jefferson is somebody that you can play. I think he's a really good play, and I think he's a really good tournament play because I think people are just going to ignore that game and ignore that total. But in cash, I'm not really worried about people playing Justin Jefferson. I don't think Amon-Ra gets a ton of roster percentage, although I think he's a good play as well. So the wide receivers that I am seeing for cash that I'm considering is Puka Nacua at 7.3 and George Pickens at 7K. Those are kind of like the top options. We did get news that Devontae Adams wasn't at practice, but whenever I see Adams practice news, I just kind of ignore it until we get stuff later on in the week. If Adams were to miss, then Garrett Wilson is somebody we would definitely talk about, and you'd see that reflected. But Puka and Pickens are probably my favorite in the expensive tier.
Yeah, agreed. That's kind of where I was looking too for expensive plays. As you know, you're the FanDuel guy, so I'll let you talk about Pickens on FanDuel. He just fits that scoring system so much better, and he's only $500 more over there. So my lean, I've been playing both sites actually, cash these days, and it's been kind of fun because you can mix and match certain players and different pricing algorithm and whatever. My lean right now is to play Pickens on FanDuel and not play him on DraftKings, just because of kind of how the builds work. You could, we love this spot for him. We're going to talk about that game here in a minute. But at the top, I agree with you. Those are the two guys. Puka, no question, he's the dude over Cooper Kupp right now in the usage as far as the receiving game goes. So I think he's in play. But again, these are all just decision points that you make in terms of how much you want to spend at wide receiver. Because again, I already mentioned my preferred way to build right now is to spend up at running back and spend down a little bit at wide receiver.
Yeah, you mentioned it on Tuesday. This is like 2016, 2017 DFS. This is what we're doing.
You're the running back, baby.
That's what we're going for. So those are our top guys that are expensive. I do think Pickens will be much more popular on FanDuel where he's 7.5. So I have him circled there. I think in the 6K range, you're going to see a lot of Khalil Shakir. We'll also talk about the Buffalo Kansas City game, but at 6.3, we're trying to figure out their receiving room. And every single week, there's somebody who's missing. Keon Coleman was ruled out on Monday? Like it was just very quick. Dalton Kincaid wasn't at practice, and then we're still trying to figure out. I think the Amari Cooper blurb today, as of our recording, was like him and Josh Allen were like throwing a ball. Like it didn't even sound like they were practicing.
Yes, he was running routes on air. Was the blurb? He's dealing with the left wrist injury. He's missed the last couple games. He's been seen with like a splint. Thing? He's been seen with a splint on his wrist, and this past week, my understanding was the first time he's actually caught footballs out of the jug machine. So I still don't know if he plays, and I don't even know if you can really trust him specifically. But obviously, his availability, his routes that he would take up, all those things would matter for guys like Shakir, maybe Curtis Samuel, who's kind of showing up in optimizers. By the way, Curtis Samuel is 3,300, so that's why. But my lean is to play Shakir, assuming Amari Cooper is out. I still think you could play him if he's in, but we're going to talk about that game. And the way that both these defenses set up to play is like keep the ball in front of you, funnel targets to the middle of the field. That's what Shakir does. I think Shakir's a pretty good fade on FanDuel for tournaments. And he's going to be popular there too, but just like how he plays and like how he has to win, it's volume and it's not a lot of big plays. So in PPR, that can work for cash games. I question the ceiling certainly, but for cash at 6,300, I think he's fine. I'll also throw out Jacoby Myers. He's just solid. Every week he's solid, and he's in the 5K range. Saw 11 targets before the bye week. It's basically just him and Brock Bowers in that passing tree. So I like Jacoby Myers there in the mid range quite a bit.
Yeah, I it's so hard for me to click the button for him.
He's good, man.
He's fine.
No, he's good.
I'd rather play Juwan Jennings at 5,300 if I had to pick.
Yeah, or I was looking at builds where you play those three, actually. Shakir, Myers, and Jennings.
No, man, I'm clicking Jennings' name 3 times. That's how much I like him this week.
Oh, man. How crazy does he get in roster percentage if Kittle ends up missing this game?
So I was thinking about that when I was looking at tournaments because, Juwan Jennings is going to be, I will have to figure out the punt guys, but I think he's going to be top 3 or 4 for wide receivers. Easy, like in terms of roster percentage. But he'll be the most popular guy on the slate if Kittle's out, which puts him like in the 30%, 25% category. He's just been awesome. We've been talking about him early in the week, often in the week. So Juwan Jennings, I think at his price point right now is a really good play in cash. We can talk about later what you want to do in tournaments and setup. But I think it's going to be a lot of these guys in the 5-6K range. Shakir, Cortland Sutton at 5.9. You mentioned Jacoby Myers, Juwan Jennings. All of those dudes are going to show up in cash builds. Right now, I lean Jennings as my favorite, and then trying to figure it out from there. I think Sutton's solid. Like I think he's solid at 5.9. I hate clicking the button though. Myers and Sutton, 2 players I hate clicking the button.
I like playing Jacoby Myers when the volume's there. Without Devontae, The last 2 games, he's seen a 31% target share. Cortland Sutton's last 3 stat lines, I mean, if you like box score chasing, he's the dude for you,
if you
right?
Like points?
If you like points, if you like fantasy points, 8 for 100, 7 for 122, 670, and 1. He has also seen a 31% target share over the last 3 weeks. So I think those guys are just solid, man. That's how I like to build this week in cash.
So let's talk about some punt guys, because there's 3 or 4 that are on my radar right now. I think Curtis Samuel is going to be a popular punt play, and I'm just going to say I don't love it. Knowing that Shakir's running a lot of his routes out of the slots, like I don't love it. Kayshon Boutte, a player that I did not think we'd be talking about this year, but he's seen 6 straight targets, or 6 targets in 3 straight games for the Patriots. He's 3.5. He's on the field a ton. Last 2 weeks has been 97 and 98% of the snaps. He's going to be a punt player. And then I did want to throw out Calvin Austin. We'll talk about the game, but I think Calvin Austin is an interesting, probably more tournament play. But at 3.6, he's running the type of routes. And with Russ, he's getting targeted 21% of his routes. It's like good enough to play in DFS. So those are kind of the punt guys. Do you have a preference right now?
I mean, truthfully, I don't. I would not want to play, we're going to talk about tight end in a second. I would not want to play Dawson Knox, Shakir, and Curtis Samuel in the same cash lineup. So by default, I think Samuel's my least favorite. If he ends up being popular this week, he's probably going to be one of my favorite fades in tournaments. Just like you said, the way they used him last week, it was really interesting. He was like a traditional perimeter wide receiver in that game with the wide receiver injuries they had. And I'm just not sure Curtis Samuel can win on the perimeter anymore, especially against this KC defense. So I think he's my least favorite. I think I would just take the playing time with Kayshon Boutte. Booty, rocking everywhere. And just hope for like 8 points, honestly. but like I said, if you punt it off a bridge at defense, if you punt off a bridge at tight end, spin down a little at quarterback, you don't even have to worry about this stuff. So just keep it in mind for how you want to build. My lean is to like not have to play these guys and just go balance this week.
Yeah, I'll also add on FanDuel, you can play Ladd McConkey at 6.3. It's a great matchup against Cincinnati. So if you wanted to play Herbert and McConkey, and I'll also throw out Will Disley, it's a good price on FanDuel. Like the Chargers are underpriced. Same thing with J.K. Dobbins. The Chargers are underpriced as a whole, and they're in that Sunday night game. So that's FanDuel only for that. At tight end, I really like Kelsey. I probably will have Kelsey as my top play. That does not mean that I can get up to Kelsey all the time. Like often when we talk about this is our favorite player, it's kind of weighing, are you playing Kelsey at 6.3 or are you playing Shakir at 6.3? Because they're both the same price. I think if I were just adjusting for all of that, I'd rather play Kelsey. But you're thinking about how you can usually pay down at tight end and kind of have similar builds. So I think Kelsey's my favorite. Dawson Knox, I think if Kincaid's out, it's going to get a lot of steam, and he rightfully should, at 3.5. Davis Allen, we mentioned him, the Rams tight end, is the Stone Min. If you want to play him, you could get an air ball, but I think he's a fine play.
Yeah, we mentioned that on Tuesday just briefly, but for those that missed it, he has leapfrogged Colby Parkinson as the top option at the tight end position for the Rams. It's tough when you're competing with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua for targets, and Kyron Williams is going to get his 18 to 20 carries. It doesn't leave a lot for Davis Allen. Fortunately, he is $2,500, so you don't need a lot to get there in cash games. So yeah, keep him in your pool. My lean right now is to try to find the money to get up to Dalton Kincaid, just better game environment. I think overall, the matchup is good. The Chiefs funnel the targets over the middle of the field where Dawson Knox will run his routes. So that's my preferred play if you need to pick one.
All right. I don't mind Brock Bowers either. Like, would you rather play Brock Bowers or Jacoby Myers? They're basically the same price.
Yeah, $5,800 on DraftKings for Bowers, and Jacoby is what, $5,600?
Yep. Like, if you could stick Bowers in the wide receiver spot, you would pick Bowers.
Probably.
Yeah, I think
Probably,
so.
yeah.
I think he's going to get, some roster percentage this week because I think he's a solid play, but I toyed around with the idea of like, is he a slate breaker type? Is he in the pool? I think Brock Bowers can have some monster games coming up. At defense this week, we talked about the Packers at 3.5. It's kind of expensive, but we talked about Caleb Williams being a player that knows how to take sacks and not avoid them. I was comparing Caleb and what he's doing, and then I was looking at Lamar, and Lamar this year is number 1 in EPA when he's being pressured. And like that's just a huge thing. When you are getting pressured over and over again, sack avoidance is like the number 1 thing. So Caleb, if you want to go there, you can do it. I think Miami is a really safe option at home against whatever quarterback they're throwing out there, Gardner, AOC, Desmond Ridder.
Well, it's not going to be AOC.
I know. I just feel bad that they don't even know what they're doing.
Oh, man. Can you imagine being Desmond Ridder? You know, you get this like word out in the public of like, oh, this can be my week. I mean, they're thinking about going to the change. He's like getting ready, getting all hyped up. And then they're like, you know what, man? We thought about it. We can't do it. Sorry. And we're going to go back to Gardner. So yeah, the Dolphins 9th in pressure rate this year. You saw them on Monday night. They had a great game against Stafford. And the Rams, it's a spot you want to pick on for sure. So Dolphins at home, favored by a touchdown, makes a lot of sense to me. What are your thoughts on the Titans? They are very cheap, and Sam Darnold is regressing.
I don't mind it. They won't have L'Jarius Sneed, but at 2.3, I'm just looking for 3 or 4 points. Like I'm not trying to get any.
That's it, huh?
If I get that, I'm happy about that. I mean,
I would like more than 3 points.
At 2.3, it's one of those things. Do you think they will be popular, Miami and Tennessee? Like those will be the 2.
I think those will be the 2, and people will want to find the money to play the Packers. So I think those 3 in cash will be popular.
Okay. If you want to play Minnesota in a tournament, do it against Will Levis. It's just going to be fun to go there. All right, moving on.
Stack Attack.
We are going to preview 3 games this week, and this is a slate where the games have not really gone off the way that I wanted them to when it comes to people betting them up. So I see a lot of routes to some of these games dudding. And we'll start with this first one. It's Baltimore at Pittsburgh. Baltimore is a 3-point road favorite, and the over-under is 48. And so far, if you've watched Baltimore games on TV, that first one against the Chiefs, and then we saw the Cincy one this past week, like all of their games have been really fun to watch. A couple of them super confusing, right? When they lost to the Raiders, by the way. I don't know how that happened. But number 1 in EPA per play, number 1 in points per game, number 1 in combined points per game. So we've seen a lot of offense. We haven't seen a lot of defense from the Ravens, who are on pace to allow the most passing yards of all time. Did you know what happened in these games last year, Betz, between these 2 teams? Do you have any memory?
No, tell me.
Yeah, and I'm never trying to trick you with that. I was just seeing if it jolts your memory. I forgot.
Cool, because I always feel like an idiot.
No, it's more of like, hey, do you have off the top of your head? Pittsburgh won both games last year, and they were the exact same score in both games, 17-10.
Dude, that is 1998 football. You know, run it, control the clock. You love it. You love to see it.
Yeah, Harbaugh and Tomlin know each other pretty well. Like 2 of the best coaches in the league. They should both go to the Hall of Fame. They're great coaches for a long time, which is rare. And so it looks like this game should be going off for fantasy purposes. But we know that you can't really run against either team. Pittsburgh's giving it up in some places, but like the matchup says we want to go in on the passing games. We think that George Pickens is a great play. We're even going to talk about Russ. So where do you want to start talking?
Yeah, let's start on that Pittsburgh side, because that to me is the key, right? You think about how teams have attacked the Ravens all season long. Throw the ball, right? The problem is you have an offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, on that sideline that loves to run the football and play balanced. So I struggle with this kind of back and forth of like, rationally, he should just drop back Russ at the highest rate he will all year and let him chuck, because that's what the matchup says. But his identity is not to do that. At the same time, Najee Harris is dealing with an ankle issue this week. So logically, I think we're going to see more pass attempts from Russ than we normally would. However, I do have this thing in the back of my mind of like, is Arthur Smith just that stubborn, and like he'll run on 1st and 2nd down to set up, 3rd and 7, third and manageable. I feel like that's possible here. At the same time, I mean, Russ is chucking it. He's chucking it deep when he does throw. Second in among all quarterbacks in terms of the rate of his pass attempts that go 20 plus yards down the field. Now you get a Ravens defense that's just giving up huge plays over and over again. And one of their best players defensively, Kyle Hamilton, is likely to miss this game. So it sets up extremely well for George Pickens. It sets up extremely well for these Russ Moon balls to happen. that I'm interested in that stack for tournaments if the field is not going to play it for sure. The problem is I don't know who the second stack partner is, and I don't even know if you need one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, with Russ, you're hitting the deep bomb. That's why I mentioned Calvin Austin in 3 Russ starts, 21% targets per out run, 1.8 yards per out run, and he gets the big plays. So Mike Williams is probably somebody that people will look at, but just 9 snaps last week. He caught a touchdown. I think it's just really hard to like double stack Russ in this game.
Right.
I do think I need to mention that Najee, like the benefit for Najee, even if he's been a plotter in some weeks, is that he keeps getting opportunities on the ground and red zone opportunities, where with Justin Field kind of took some of those away. So I think Najee's an interesting play. And if you look at the last couple games, he actually balled out against Baltimore in 2 of his last 3. So he's like an interesting like leverage play in this game. I don't love clicking Najee, but he is interesting. Pickens is going to get steamed up. I think looking at this game, is Pickens going to be the most popular play?
Yeah, I think certainly.
Okay. So then on the other side, like we always talk about it, is Henry going to be popular? I feel like he's not going to get clicked a lot, and my early runs are seeing like 6-7%.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. So, I mean, if that holds, that looks nice.
Yeah, if you just look at this game script and say, this is what Vegas says, you think Baltimore wins the game, you could easily just play Henry. You can play Pickens on the other side and absorb the roster percentage because Henry's not that popular, and just get out of this game. Because Lamar is expensive, and I do need to mention that Lamar has never scored 20 DraftKings points against the Steelers.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he's been hurt in a lot of them, so he only has 4 career starts, but still, we know the Steelers' defense is good.
Okay, it's not that crazy. It's only been a handful of starts.
Still, but it's
and
Lamar.
He's been hurt in 80% of them.
No, he's been hurt, and that's why he's only played them 4 times.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, this sounds like crazy to say. I don't have a lot of interest in Lamar this week, personally.
Just win MVP, but I'm not going to play you in DFS.
Correct. We need the win for the MVP tickets, but I only want to play him in DFS. Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, again, pricing dynamics. He's $8K, and there's not a lot of like good values elsewhere. So when you play Lamar, you sacrifice.
Where is the value?
Plays. Where is the value menu, DraftKings? I don't know where it is. It's not Curtis Samuel, I'll tell you that much.
It's Tylan Wallace, isn't it?
It's obviously Tylan Wallace. Great game on Thursday night. So that's the struggle for me. So I'm with you. I think this is to me either like a Russ single stack with Pickens, bring it back with Henry or Zay Flowers, or like a mini Pickens and Flowers, something like that. That's how I'm viewing this game personally. I know you like Flowers a lot this week. Talk to me about him.
I do like some Flowers. So football take here. Steelers, they play single high safety looks 71% of the time. That's the highest in the NFL. So a lot of times we talk about coverages. We go, they play this 10% of the time. It's not a really big deal. This is a big deal. And this year, against single high looks, Zay has a 30% target share and a 3.36 yards per out run. It's top 5 in the league. So I think Zay Flowers is one of those plays that you kind of go back and forth looking at his box scores. And you're like, I don't really know if I want to go back to him. He had a bad game. Look what Tylan Wallace did. Now they have Deontay Johnson. I mean, they do have a lot of different names that could get the football, but I think Zay Flowers is a really good tournament play. And I don't think a lot of people are going to play him this week. And when I say stuff like that, I'm like, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, but I don't see people playing him.
You say that, and then you look at the roster percentage right after. You're correct. I'm seeing sub 10% on Zay Flowers. So that screams tournament play to me. And we've seen him, even against Denver, like a couple weeks ago. That's a difficult matchup. He smashed. So Zay Flowers has had a great year. If no one is going to play him, he looks like a great play this week.
All right. So it sounds like Henry, Flowers, and then Russ and Pickens are really our only favorite plays with the shoot the moon play of Calvin Austin. I get credit if he catches a touchdown, right?
Only if you play him.
Okay. No, then I'll play him, and I'll just probably lose money on the lineup. But I mean, for you, I think the real question is, are you going to play Big Mike Willie in a lineup? Your boy.
I am not. I thought you were going to ask me about Mark Andrews because we didn't talk about him. I could have cried last Thursday, Kyle. Okay. Vintage Mark Andrews on primetime, national stage. The best ball teams are back. However, I think Isaiah likely returns to this game. So I don't know where the truth is on Mark Andrews because for a while he was splitting routes and obviously not seeing a lot of targets. Then he ramped up in his playing time and his usage, and then it exploded without Isaiah Likely. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So it's tough. I don't think he's a standout play with Likely in the lineup. That said, if you're correlating this game, certainly you could do worse than Mark Andrews, who's 4,600 on DraftKings. So he's in the pool for sure for tournaments, but to me, I think it's only if I'm getting into this game and I'm predicting the over to hit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried about the total. It was bet down, correct?
It kind of bounced back and forth. It went up early in the week and then back down. So tells you the line is probably right.
I will be taking the Steelers +3.
Is this what confidence do we got here? Is this Jets money line confidence or where are we at?
On a scale of Jets money line to Washington Commanders under for the year.
Where are we at on that scale?
Oh man, pretty close to that. I'm going to say.
Okay, then I'll take Baltimore -3.
Oh my! Do you really think that?
I think at 3, I would take Pittsburgh. If it got to 2.5, I would take Baltimore.
That's fair. All right, next game, Seattle at San Francisco. The 49ers are 6.5-point home favorites. The over-under is 48. We kind of know the story with San Francisco. They're efficient. They're number 1 in red zone plays per game. And Seattle's defense, like you look at their metrics for the year, you're like, oh, their defense is not great, not bad, whatever. Take out the first 3 weeks where they played terrible opponents and just sort by week 4 on. They've been really, really bad. Dead last in EPA per play, 29th in points per game allowed. I think that this is the game that I want to be overweight this week. And
I thought so too. Sorry to cut you off. But when we talked Tuesday, right? The total was at 50.5. It is down to 48 as of our recording. So I don't know what to think, but the numbers say we should play it, right?
Well, all those people know that whenever there's a 50-point total and it's at 50.5, it's a key number. That's key.
Mm-hmm.
You take the under there. Then, when the game's between 46 and 49, what do? So I bet there's somebody that's just, hedging right there. They're hoping for the middle, hoping the game hits 49, and they just win a ton of money.
Interesting. Yes, that's what our model says. And by model, I mean historically, that's what happens. I think we see points here. So I'm willing to go against the market and, what could go wrong? So I like the over here. I'm with you. I like this game a lot. You mentioned the Seattle defense. They've had just so many issues. They've been terrible, really over the last 6 weeks. So it's a great spot for the Niners. We talked about Purdy. We talked about CMC. We talked about Juwan Jennings already a little bit. To me, the way that you play this game is probably with a couple of those pieces that are chalk, which is, it's fine to play chalk in tournaments. Just make sure you get different elsewhere. Debo feels like a guy that's just nobody wants him anymore. That's kind of what I feel when I log in to click the button and I'm like, it's been a while. And then you kind of see the new hotness of Jennings, of course, CMC.
Ricky P.
Debo looks like an awesome tournament play this week.
Yeah, I think people look around and they go okay, Debo's kind of trending in the wrong direction. We know that Juwan's the next Randy Moss. And then Ricky P is just out there doing his thing. I think he is a really good leverage play on CMC. I think he's a very good leverage play on Juwan Jennings. And so the more I look at this in small field, I feel like Debo Samuel's one of those plays that you can just get a ton of leverage on the field. But I can't get away from CMC, man. I might...
Yeah, you can play them together, though, I think. I think it's fine.
They've had good correlation in the past. I remember looking up those two together, and you're just saying to yourself, okay, I think CMC gets there on the ground. I think Debo gets there, and then maybe you stay away from Purdy, and you just shoot for another quarterback somewhere else, and you say, I think there's more upside with a different quarterback in a different game. I think that's part of let's say they get 2 rushing touchdowns between the two. It takes away from Purdy.
It does. My inclination is to just play him with Purdy and just say Niners on a smaller slate, put up 30, and that's the team you need. That's how I would play it personally. But I hear what you're saying. If rushing touchdowns go to Debo or something. But either way, I think we both agree you want some Niners this week. That's how I'm playing it. We played them last week. It kind of worked out, but didn't, because the pieces that people played were fine, but not incredible, right? CMC, which it's just crazy how good he is, right? His floor game is 17 DraftKings points when it's he was disappointing. Still gets you 17 every single time. Didn't score a touchdown last week. I think he scores this week. And then you think about Debo, the ceiling is obviously there. So I want this team here. They still are in the red zone all the time. For some reason, they're still not scoring touchdowns. I think it happens in this spot at home against the Seattle Seahawks.
On the other side, excuse me, I think the Seattle wide receivers are going to be overlooked in this game from a roster percentage standpoint. And DK is a great tag at 6.5, JSN 6.5. Lockett is always worth throwing in large field if you want to add another piece. But we like Seattle because they're third in neutral pace, and they're one of the few teams that actually still has a positive pass rate over expectation. So it's volume. And I was looking at the games that just DK was involved. Geno's averaging 40 pass attempts. So if you knew you were getting 40 pass attempts here, then it makes it really easy to have a bring back and pick the wide receiver. I like DK a lot. I think he's in a really, really good spot. And then what do you do with Kenneth Walker? Because he kind of is a pass catcher that we have to include in this group. And, I don't love playing two running backs in the same game, but CMC is not a normal running back, and Walker's kind of been morphing into, more than just a touchdown guy.
Yeah, I really like Walker a lot this week, actually, as far as a tournament play goes. It's kind of a sneaky spot for him to be a contributor in the receiving game. San Francisco has faced the 5th highest running back target share in the league this year, allowing the 8th most yards to opposing backs. So I think Walker could get there as a pass catcher. It's also quietly a pretty good matchup on the ground. San Francisco's run D has struggled over the last month and a half. The last 6 weeks, 28th in EPA per rush, 25th in success rate. They're allowing 4.36 yards per carry. So there's multiple paths for Walker to get there. Obviously, on the road, 6.5 point underdog usually is not the recipe for success for running backs in fantasy. However, the receiving work could be there. So I like him. I probably wouldn't play him as like part of Geno stacks. For me, it'd just be like a one-off or like a bring back on, a Purdy, Debo, Jennings team or something like that. But I do like Walker a lot this week in tournaments.
I was thinking about how we use terms. I mean, DFS has its own lingo and terminology, but I usually use the word like, I think he's sneaky this week, or this player has quietly done this. It's someone quietly doing it. Is that basically just me saying like, I don't think people realize that this is who they are?
Yeah, I think that's what that means.
Like Brock Purdy, I mentioned he's quietly has the same amount of rush attempts as Kyler Murray.
That's true. See, I didn't even know that. I was unaware of that fact. So that's a perfect example.
I wish he would wake up to the fact that he's, running more than Kyler. Okay?
It's basically the next Lamar Jackson.
I love Brock Purdy. He's a fun player to root for. I think in this game, I also saw some stuff about Noah Fant. Do we have any update? Like he wasn't at practice?
He did not play before the bye week. He was out with a groin injury on groinindex.com. And in that game, AJ Barner played 91% of the snaps.
Michigan
did
great.
Did see 7 targets. Now that game was also without DK Metcalf. So kind of a great assault situation there. But yes, I'm not sure if Fant plays. It looks like he's unlikely to play. If he's out, I think Barner enters the conversation of a punt option to get into this game, whether you're doing a Geno stack with like Geno, DK, and AJ Barner and bring it back with CMC or something like that. That makes sense to me. Otherwise, I'm not too interested in the tight end position, for Seattle.
If Kittle does play though, are you interested?
Oh, baby.
Yeah.
This is a spot. Seattle has faced the 5th highest target share to inline pass catchers. Hello, George Kittle, who crushed them a few weeks ago in that Thursday night game. So, assuming he's healthy, Kittle to me looks like a really strong tournament play once again.
Hamstring irritation? Is that the whatever that means?
Allegedly.
What is that code for?
It's a great question.
See,
what happens is coaches hear like through the grapevine of like the second and third trainer of like what's going on, and they just want to know like, can he play or not? And then they catch like a word or two of it and they just like tell the media that's what's happening. But man, I told you Kyle Shanahan is a sicko. If he is on the field, he will be playing every snap. They have to win this game.
Yeah, I think crazy thing about Kittle is he's been great. Good's not even the right word. Like he's been tight end 1, fantasy points per game, everything. Touchdowns have been flowing the whole time, 70 plus receiving yards per game. And because of this injury tag, I feel like people aren't going to play him. He's quietly going to be down there in roster percentage. Super
That's
quiet.
great.
Sneaky.
That's a great point.
Sneaky and quiet.
Yes to all of those.
All right, give me your Vegas take.
I am going to take the over on 48 points.
I am as well. What could possibly go wrong? It's going to be a good game to look. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. We are back. We're going to preview one more game. It is the Kansas City Chiefs at the Buffalo Bills. But, and this is a huge but, this is not your mama's Chiefs-Bills game. This isn't your, COVID years of these games where you just saw barn burners, your Gabe Davis 4-touchdown game. Like, we're not getting that back, man. This is not what this is anymore. In fact, the last 3 games have averaged 44 combined points. It's not been great, Bob. So when we look at this matchup, I used to say just play everybody because it's just going to be a bonanza. Now with all of these injuries, especially on the Bills side, it's kind of hard to truly get there. The over-under is only at 45.5, and the Bills are 2-point home favorites. So the total's not great, but there's not a lot of other great games on this slate. So I think where I like starting is thinking about these quarterbacks, thinking about the upside that they have, and who I want to stack them with. So where do you want to start?
Let's start on the Chiefs side, because with Mahomes, it's been a struggle. Really, he hasn't done much in fantasy for a long, long time. Do something, Patrick. But we did see a couple weeks ago against the Bucs, when they got DeAndre Hopkins in there, they actually had a pretty high pass rate. My fear, though, is that that's not going to be the case in this game, because when you look at how they play defensively for Buffalo, right? It's like keep everything in front of you, let the running backs get the ball, let the running back beat you, and then when they hand off to Kareem Hunt, presumably 18 plus times in this game, assuming the game is close, it's a good matchup for Kareem Hunt. The play clock just drains, right? When Kareem Hunt is going for somewhere between 3 and 7 and never more than that yards on every carry, it's like the play clock just drains and drains and drains. You've got a low ADOT for Pat Mahomes. So the way I see this game playing out for Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs is the ability to sustain drives. Do they score a touchdown or not when they get in the red zone? And if they don't, this game's going to hit the under. So I don't have a ton of interest in Mahomes stacks, if I'm being honest. I would rather play it through Kareem Hunt as a leverage play or something like that, because he's not going to get played on the slate, rather than play a Mahomes stack. That's where I'm at with Mahomes. Where are you at?
Yeah, I think when I look at this game, the most popular options will be these cheap Buffalo wide receiver. I mean, it's Shakir, Samuel, some people play Mac Hollins, Dawson Knox, and those just feel like very easy plays to get away from in tournaments.
For sure.
Just eating up. So I think James Cook is a great play. You remember last year, he tore them up for 100 plus yards. So I think James Cook is interesting as a tournament play. I feel like you and I always talk him up as hey, if nobody's playing James Cook, do it. But Hunt, for the volume and the price at 6,700, is just a really, really good play. I mean, Buffalo's been terrible against the run all year. So I think if you wanted to, though, with Mahomes, you could just do Mahomes, Kelsey, and then bring it back with Shakir or Cook and get out of this game. If you just want to do a simple correlation play of Hunt and Khalil Shakir, I'm totally fine with that, or Hunt and pick cheap player. But I think Kelsey is kind of the key piece of this game that I think can truly go off. So that's what I'm trying to weigh is I'm afraid that if I'm underweight Kelsey, he's the only tight end on the slate other than Bowers, and if Kittle plays, that could just ruin the field.
Yep, that's a great point. And when you think about Kelsey's going to be played somewhat decently, nothing crazy, but relative to Dawson Knox, assuming Dalton Kincaid is out, it'll be a fraction of that. So if you want to think about just flipping the build a little bit in this game and playing Kelsey over Dawson Knox as leverage, I think that makes sense. I'm having some trouble though, just trying to think about where are the other leverage spots besides the running backs? Because like you said, every pass catcher on Buffalo as of now looks very popular. Josh Allen is expensive. I mean, for good reason, but expensive. It's a good KC defense. We just talked about how these games are usually lower scoring. I just find it tough to find good pivots in this game. So I think my general stance is I'm lower than the market on this game.
Sounds like you want to play a naked Josh Allen. Okay.
No.
Sounds like you want to skinny stack Josh Allen and then bring it back with Kelsey or Hunt.
Yeah, I think the running backs are my favorite play here, honestly.
I
Both
think
of them.
Allen's not going to get played a ton, though.
No, he's probably not. It's 7,800 feels like he should just smash that tag, but he really hasn't been doing that. And now you get the Chiefs, and I think this game going to be low scoring. So I don't know, man. I'm probably not going to play it.
All right, let me read you Josh Allen's DK points in the last 5. Okay, 24,
Okay.
24, 20.8, 23, and 20.
Very good. But when you play him, what are you sacrificing at wide receiver, running back? That's the part I'm struggling with Allen. Like he might be really good for you, but he might not be enough for you to like smash in a tournament, especially large field. Like if you're playing Josh Allen at almost 8K on DraftKings, you better hope he puts up at least 30 to win something meaningful in large field. That's where I struggle with it.
Yeah, it's just tough when you look at the pace. Like both of these teams are outside the top 12 in neutral pace, and we've never had that in any of the other games. Like I was going back all the way to 2018, and it's like in 2020, it was like these teams played faster, the pass rate was up, and granted, Buffalo has changed their offense recently, but I think my favorite pieces are the running backs as leverage plays, and then I will have a lot of Kelsey. Like I don't mind playing Kelsey as a one-off or Kelsey as a correlation play with Shakir.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, give me your Vegas take.
I'm going to go under on this game. And you already told us on Tuesday, KC was the lock of the week.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's the easiest thing of the week. That is something you should definitely put in your parlay. It definitely won't break it up. All right. Do you have a couple other stacks you want to bring up?
Yeah, I just want to mention like the slate is lower scoring, I think, in general when you look at it. As of our recording, the highest game on the week total wise entering Thursday night is this Eagles Commanders game. So every game on this slate is like between like 39.5 and 48. So there's no like standout game environments overall, which means you can get into some of these other spots. I like Atlanta, Denver. We talked about that on Tuesday. If you want to go back and check that out, like I think Bo Nix plus Sutton makes sense. Bring it back with Bijan or with Drake London. Like those kind of things make a lot of sense to me. Detroit, oh baby, at home, 30-point implied total. Taking on the Jaguars, you do not need to bring back. You can just play Lions. And what's crazy, we were talking before we recorded, like nobody is projecting for more than like 12% on the Lions, which doesn't make any sense because they should score a ton of points. And I don't think Sam Laporta plays in this game. So you could have some more value to there as far as target share. So what are your thoughts on those two spots, Atlanta, Denver, and then just Detroit onslaughts?
Yeah, I think Detroit onslaughts is what I like the most. And I think a lot of times people feel uncomfortable or they will say stuff like, oh, they'll just get up early. It's like, well, the way that they got up early and they got to 30 plus points is, 2 or 3 guys going there. So I don't like the Jacksonville side, but if you wanted to play 3 Lions, if you wanted to play, Goff, Gibbs, and Amon-Ra, that's a lot to pay up for. But I do think that like Jameson Williams is in a kind of a good spot. Like, I kind of like him for tournaments, and I hate saying that.
I like a lot of these guys for tournaments. Yeah.
So onslaught stacks are definitely like I'm on board with that. I do think Bijan is a player that's going to see a ton of passing work this week. So he's kind of interesting if you want to correlate him with Sutton. I'm totally cool with that. All right, moving on.
Slate Breaker of the Week.
All right, our Slate Breaker of the Week this week is brought to you by Dad Slippers, because there's nothing better,
baby.
Than
I love it.
I mean, and you know what's great is I looked at my slippers this morning, and I said I think I'm due for some new ones, and Christmas is right around the corner, so I'm feeling pretty good that I'm gonna get some fresh slips for the holiday season.
I got some last year. I honestly can't tell you how happy I was, and I don't think I've been that happy in a year.
I'm wearing some Atlanta Falcons slides right now. Not a sponsor. If you want to sponsor me, Falcons, go for it.
The NFL franchise would you like to sponsor this show?
This segment's brought to you by the Falcons. They're comfortable too. My Slate Breaker this week is DK Metcalf. And I think he is likely going to be rostered 5% or less. Geno's averaging 40 pass attempts per game with DK. I mentioned that. 31.5 without him. So the pass volume is there when DK is part of it. The 49ers, they have are allowing the 7th most fantasy points per dropback against 2-eye looks. Metcalf has been awesome there, 2.69 yards per out run. And on the road this year, here's the key stat. He's balled out. He is completely balled out. He's averaged 11 targets, 7 for 110, and DK points on the road this year, 31.9, 18.4, and that's without a touchdown. And the last time was 19.9, where he was 1 yard away from a bonus. So DK Metcalf on the road has been leaned on. I think he's going to be really, really good and lowly rostered.
I love it. I'm going with George Pickens.
Who?
This is the spot, man. Wide receiver ones against Baltimore. Jamar Chase cooked him twice. Cortland Sutton, 122 yards. Cedric Tillman, 99 yards, 2 touchdowns. Godwin and Evans, Devontae Adams, back when he was a Raider. Like, all these wide receiver ones are getting there against the Ravens. They give up the highest rate of explosive passes. Enter George Pickens with his massive, massive ADOT and the ability to hit long plays. It just makes so much sense. And even if he gets like 15% on DraftKings, I'm cool with it, right? It's not that much. So I'm in on George Pickens this week. I plan to play a lot of him.
It's time for Borg versus Betz, presented by DraftKings.
You don't have a sports book? No problem. You can play DraftKings Pick 6 with us. We will ignore the fact that we did not have a good week with Pick 6 last week because we were undefeated in props, right?
We got crushed in Pick 6.
Pick 6 last week, I was feeling really good with Ramondre, and on like his last carry, hit over. And then Dalton Kincaid got hurt. So mine were both very, 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 very sad on those. But on the season, we still have a great record. And I will go first for my Pick 6, and make sure you check your lines. Things change. But Calvin Ridley, I'm going to take the more on his receiving yards of 54.5. Since DeAndre Hopkins was traded, his receiving yards, 143, 73, and 84. He is cleared this, and wide receiver ones against Minnesota have hit the more in 8 of 9 games, and Ridley is that dude.
Makes a lot of sense. I will take James Cook less than 56.5 rushing yards. This Kansas City defense is dominant against the run. They've only allowed one running back to get over this. That was Jordan Mason a few weeks ago for 58 yards, so it barely cleared it. KC, 4th in EPA per rush attempt, 2nd in yards per carry, number 1 in explosive rush rate. And actually with the Bills, they've been a lot more pass heavy over the last month. So I will take the less on James Cook's rushing.
All right, I will take a less on Tua's pass attempts at 29.5. He's been less in his last 2. This game figures to be, not very competitive. They're 7-point favorites. And also, if you look at his passing yards line, it's at 240. He's been under that in 3 straight since he's returned. Their pass rate over expectation has been super low. So Tua less than his 29.5 pass attempts.
Okay, makes sense. I'm going to take less than 266.5 passing yards for Joe Burrow in the Sunday night game, which is crazy because we all just saw him throw for 6,000 yards last Thursday night. But he's actually been under this line in 7 of 10 games this year, including 4 of 5 road games. They travel to take on LA. The Chargers, number 2 in EPA per dropback, number 2 in success rate this year, allowing the 5th lowest yards per attempt. So I will take less on Joe Burrow. And I'll be honest with you, it scares me.
It should scare you a little bit, but I don't mind. I'm going to give a bonus because the people are asking for it. They heard our props, but I got to give it, man. The people need...
They need it. They love it.
They need the kicking prop of the week. I'm going to take Jason Sanders of the Dolphins more on his 7.5 kicking points. Betz, what if I told you that Miami has a 25.5 team implied total? What if I told you that the Raiders are allowing the most kicking points in the NFL and allowed the more in 7 of 9 weeks? Every team that has scored over 20 points against the Raiders has hit this 8-point mark, and his line is at 7.5.
I'm going to go in my home league waiver wire and pick up Jason Sanders to play this week.
Please let me make this an official. The people need it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
It's fine. We can do it.
All right, perfect. That was Borg versus Betz presented by DraftKings Pick 6. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code BALLERS.
Ballers.
That's code BALLERS for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Betz, tell everyone goodbye.
Great show, Kyle. We did it. What is this, week 11? Fun slate ahead. Don't be afraid to go off the board this week because the game environments are not the greatest. But Kyle has informed us the Chiefs are a lock. And George Pickens is gonna break the slate. So good luck to everybody out there this weekend. Bring home a lot of money, and we'll see you guys next Tuesday.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.